Part two of I know how many tenths there are in all of a number. Hi guys, there's an easy method I could give you to do these, but that wouldn't be a good way of teaching because when we just learn methods, we tend to forget them. Maybe by the end of the video, you will have worked out the method yourself. So let's just have a look. What I've got there is a tenth. So how many wholes are there? Now remember, we're always going about pizzas. There's one pizza, I have a pizza, cut it up into 10 equal pieces, and I eat one of them. That's a tenth. Now, what happens if I take the same pizza and I cut it up into 100 equal pieces? Can you see there's that red tenth? It's still the same size, hasn't changed. That now gets cut into 10 equal slices as well. So there's the tenth, and there is the tenth divided into 10 equal pieces. Now, what fraction is this small slice? Just the red one. Of the whole pizza, it is 1/100th. Okay, so very briefly, again, there's the whole pizza, there's a tenth, there's the tenth divided into 10 equal parts, and we say that's 100th. So 100th is a tenth of a tenth. There's the tenth, and there's a tenth of it. And that's just showing you what it looks like where all the other slices would be sliced up as well. Now, 1/10 of 1/10, there it is. There is your tenth. That's 1/10 of your tenth. There it is. And that's 100th. 1/10 of 1/10 equals 100th. So if we look at 0.1, and I said to you, how many tenths are there? I'll just put that there for a moment. So you know 0.1 is 1/10. How many tenths are in this number? It is easy. There it is. The 1 goes there, the 0 goes there, and the answer is that there is 1/10. How about this one though, 0.01 or 1/100th? Let's have a look. There's 1/100th, there's no tenths there, and there's no whole numbers. So the question is, how many tenths are there in this number here? Well, clearly, can you see there are no whole tenths? Okay. There is a tenth of a tenth, which is 100th. So there are 0 tenths and a tenth of a tenth. Now, how do we write a tenth of anything? How many tenths are there in 0.01? There are 0.1 tenths. I'll just have a look. 0 tenths and 1/100th, and we know that 1/100th is a tenth of a tenth. So there are 0.1 tenths in 0.01. All right, let's have a look at this one. How many tenths are there in 0.03? No pizzas. Okay, let's put it into, we also know that's the same as 3/100ths. Now you can see there are no tenths. This number is smaller than 1/10. Right, that's also 3/100ths, isn't it? And if you don't understand that, you need to go and watch my video called Converting Decimals to Fractions. There it is, 0.03, no tenths, and 3/100ths, which we know are tenths of tenths. So how many tenths are there in 0.03? The answer is there are 0.3 tenths in 0.03. How many tenths are there in 0.15? There's 0.15. Well, there is a tenth. There it goes. So there's 1/10 plus 5/100ths. Now each one of these hundredths is a tenth of a tenth. So we've got 5/10ths of 100, right? So how many tenths are there in 0.15? The answer is there are 1.5. There's the 1/10 and there's the 0.5 of a tenth. Please don't say the decimal point has moved. The decimal point never moves. How many tenths are there in 0.76? There it is, 0.76. Well, there are 7 whole tenths there. There are 6 hundredths or 6 tenths of a tenth there, which is how many tenths are there in 0.76? The answer is there are 7.6 tenths in 0.76. How many tenths are there in 1.25? Well, there are 2 there. This is one whole pizza. How many do I get there? Answer, 10 tenths. So I've got 10 tenths there. I've got 2 tenths there. So I've got 12 tenths so far. And this will be 5 tenths of a tenth, which would be 0.5. So there are 12.5 tenths in 1.25. Okay, we're going to work through quite a few. I'm not going to tell you every time to pause, but I have put little reminders on the screen. Try and work out what is going, guys. So the first one, how many tenths are there in 0.12? You'll see the sign says pause and continue when you're ready to check your answer. And I will just continue. Right, how many tenths are there in 0.12? Answer, there are 1.2 tenths in 0.12. How many tenths are there in 0.70? 7. You could have put 7.0. That would have been 7 and 7.0 are the same. I put that 0 in there to make sure you understood that this 0 doesn't really make any difference. There are only 7 tenths. How many tenths are there in 0.07? Answer, 0.7. See, no tenths, 7 tenths of a tenth. How many tenths are there in 0.19? There are 1.9 tenths in 0.19. How many tenths are there in 0.91? 9.1. How many tenths are there in 1.31? 13.1. How many tenths are there in 0.99? 9.9. How many tenths are there in 2.50? 25. You could have put 25.0. How many tenths are there in 1.02? Right, no tenths there, 10 tenths there, and 2 tenths of a tenth there, so 10.2. How many tenths are there in 0.95? 9.5. How many tenths are there in 5.06? 50.6. How many tenths are there in 1.11? 11.1. How many tenths are there in 3.63? 36.3. How many tenths are there in 0.90? 9. How many tenths are there in 0.04? 4. 0.4. And you could have put 0.40, but yeah, 0.4 is the best answer. How many tenths are there in 0.87? 8.7. How many tenths are there in 3.72? 37.2. How many tenths are there in 1.06? 10.6. How many tenths are there in 0.81? 8.1. How many tenths are there in 4.8? 48. I don't know why I put the 80 there. I think I won't meant the question to be that. Right, there are 48. How many tenths are there in 0.1? 1. How many tenths are there in 9.17? 91.7. 4.02. How many tenths? 40.2. How many tenths are there in 0.06? 0.6. See, no tenths and 6 tenths of a tenth. How many tenths are there in 0.40? 4. Yep, 4 in the tenths column. How many tenths are there in 12.32? Right, there are 3 there. Each one of these 2 pizzas would give me 10, so that's 20 tenths there. Now I've got 10 pizzas here, and each one of those gives me 10 slices, so that's 100. So I've got 120. I've got 3 here, that's 123, and I've got 2 tenths of a tenth there. 123.2. How many tenths are there in 0.64? 6.4. How many tenths are there in 0.010? 0.1. You could have put 0.100 if you wanted to, but 0.1 is fine. How many tenths are there in 85.02? 850.2. Now, something I need to say is that if you kind of worked it out, that's great. If you got a lot of them wrong, you need to go again. Don't go any further in the video. Remember, if I say to you, how many tenths are there in 1 pizza? 1 is 10. How many tenths would there be in 2 pizzas? 20. 3, 30. So literally, you just take the number of pizzas and you multiply by 10 to find out how many tenths there are. With these things here, you can do exactly the same thing. Can you see that 85.02 has just been multiplied by 10? If you don't know how to do that, there is one of my videos called How to Multiply Any Number by Powers of 10. Go and watch that. It's a really good video. So how many tenths are there in anything? We'll just multiply by 10. If you really aced that, there are 5 more for you to try. They are about just having slightly longer decimals. Try these. How many tenths are there in 0.053? 0.53. How many tenths are there in 0.137? 1.37. How many tenths are there in 0.007? 0.07. How many tenths are there in 0.309? 3.09. How many tenths are there in 1.054? 10.54. Right, that's the end of this video. This is part 2, which involves having hundredths in the number. Part 1 was just about having whole numbers and tenths. If you didn't get this, go back, watch it from the beginning. and keep going until you absolutely nail them.